Welcome back, or welcome to Fantasy Fire and Ice, powered by Sportstopia. If you're a friend of the program, you know that last week was my own personal bye week, but we're back for week 8, and it's good to be back. We're basically at the halfway point of the season before they made all those odd numbers, but I don't want to get sad about us being halfway done. I want to make the most of everything we have left. And look, we'd be nothing if it wasn't for our takes on fantasy sports. So let's start off with another piping hot edition of the Fantasy Soup. Keith, hit the graphic. Let's see it. Woo! All right. First up, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who you might remember I said on this show might actually stink. They're now rolling. They've won 5 in a row. Okay, we don't get them all right. But the guy everyone thought would be the guy might be just another guy. Take a listen.
They're close.
But see, is there a wake up for Ridley though? Because see, my thing is, this looked like the Ridley for the last season in Atlanta. And the last season in Atlanta, he was horrible. Before he went out, he was not playing well. This ain't Ridley that was looking like WR1 next to Julio Jones. This is a different Ridley. Week 1 Ridley, I'm like, okay, he's back. Now I'm like,
that's one quarter.
This guy right here is, that's right, just 1 quarter. Now I'm like, why is Christian Kirk better than this guy?
We're going to do something a little different. This right here sums up exactly what it's like to have Calvin Ridley on your fantasy team. Keith, let's hear it. Oh, it's so lovely. It's so lovely to hear Ender Sandman at the beginning. And then, well, you heard the horns. Or I hope you heard the horns. The targets are there for Ridley. The team is winning. But Calvin Ridley, where art thou? And maybe there was an inkling of why you might not be the WR1 there. There's no prime Julio Jones on the other side of you. I hope you can get it together. All right, next up. Stu, a.k.a. Monotone Bets, likes to put his money where his mouth is. But Mr. Betts couldn't seem to find the will to back the Titans this past weekend.
I love Vrabel as a dog. All the trends in the world are going to tell you to take Vrabel as a dog. The problem is you have to look at this logically at a certain extent, and you have to look at the quarterback play. Because Vrabel, I trust to cover as an underdog when you have a living, breathing human quarterback there that you can depend on.
You remember last year when he took Malik Willis to Kansas City, and Malik Willis threw the ball twice, and Kansas City had to go to overtime to beat them?
I do remember that was brought up in the argument a couple of times. Well, they covered, but see, covering 14. I know it's Kansas City.
Different, yeah, exactly.
But I wouldn't hate Tennessee if it was 14 because I think they keep this game close. They run the ball. He also covered against the Texans where they just ran the ball 80 million times as well. I think the quarterback is your ultimate limiting factor, and I just think this quarterback play is too bad to depend on right here. Levis is obviously seen as a project quarterback across the board. Malik Willis, my argument, worst quarterback in the NFL starting right now. For me, I don't see any path to offense.
Where was the offense? The offense was right there in front of us all along. DeAndre Hopkins putting up, you know that meme that pops up every Thanksgiving or on Twitter or X every now and then, Randy Moss looking at the camera with his stat line at the bottom where he had like 3 catches for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was basically what DeAndre Hopkins did. 4 catches, 128 yards, 3 touchdowns. So what if there was pass interference? If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. That's what some famous wrestler used to say. Eddie Guerrero, rest in peace. But listen, let's get to that project quarterback, Will Levis. That project looked pretty good. Will Levis tossing 4 touchdowns. We'll have more on him in a moment, but maybe now Will at least has a new fan with our own Monotone Bets. All right, so let's go to the West Coast. There's a little bit of trouble in the Bay Area, but our Terrell Furman wasn't going to bet on those 49ers dropping a third in a row.
Purdy,
Yeah, he just looks human. And, that typically happens when a guy that probably shouldn't be in MVP conversation is thrust into MVP conversations 5 games into the season. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that Brock Purdy had a little bit of a stumble along the way. I knew that Brian Flores was going to have a good game plan designed for this game, especially with how big this game was. This is one of the top teams in the NFC. Come into your crib, you want to get a dub. And so Brian Flores and this team put together a really, really good game plan. I don't think that's indicative of Brock Purdy, but just more of how good Brian Flores is as a defensive coordinator. So I don't really have any worries for Brock Purdy. There's a slightly greater than 50% chance that I'll be taking the 49ers this week.
Terrell talking about last week's loss in his analysis there. Wasn't worried about Purdy. Well, Purdy threw at least one horrific pick and added another. He still chucked it for 365 yards, but the game isn't even that close if you were watching. Burrow and the boys in the Bengal stripes look good and healthy, and there's a better than 50% chance that Terrell regrets backing the Niners, losers of 3 in a row. All right, next up. Every week, we're looking for that hidden gem on the waiver wire, right? There were some must-adds this week. Hopefully, you got some of them, but did they deliver?
And for that Week 8 win in fantasy, these 3 waiver wire players can help you secure that dub. While Zach Evans was a capital B bust for managers that picked him up in Week 7, Darrell Henderson acted like he's been on the Rams the entire season and not just elevated from the practice squad on Saturday. Second half of the rookie year wide receiver breakout, anybody? Josh Downs is in line to do just that. He clearly has chemistry with quarterback Gardner Minshew, and we're now going on 3 weeks in a row with 6+ targets and no less than 13 PPR fantasy points for Mr. Downs. It's the year of the rookie tight end, and Dalton Kincaid could be in for a big opportunity with Dawson Knox undergoing wrist surgery. Kincaid saw 8 targets in the Week 7 loss to the New England Patriots and could be in line for more weeks like that with Dawson Knox out indefinitely.
So did Henderson deliver? Listen, the only thing that related to the Rams in delivery this week was Sean McVay's new baby. They got romped. Henderson did his best, but he was kept out of the end zone. Josh Downs continued to get the targets, but the Saints were able to stop the Colts' momentum. But really hope you picked up Dalton Kincaid. He rewarded you with a touchdown and maybe should have had another, especially if you bet him to get the first touchdown of the game. We were just inches away, folks. Good on Simon for guiding us in the right direction. And finally, in this week's swimming edition of the Soup, remember how earlier, just a couple minutes ago, one of our guys wasn't sold on the Titans? Well, that man wasn't our man, Cody Carpentier, and he was all in.
And if I was in the Tennessee office, I would be like, yo, guys, we got to get a whole game out of Will Levis. We got to let him either nuke this thing, go Nathan Peterman, or we got to see if he has any opportunity of upside. And this is like the perfect game to do that in. Atlanta's not top 15 in pressures or in anything on the defensive side of the football that would allow this to be ruined by a underperforming offensive line, which is what Tennessee has right now. So give him all the opportunities in the world. Get the football out to Hopkins, to Burks, to your guys underneath Chig and Spears, and run the football with Henry. I think Tennessee wins this football game by I don't know 8, 9, 10.
8, 9, or 10. Cody's on vacation because he just nailed that pick so well. He was all in on Will Levis, the project quarterback. Not so much of a project anymore. We thought he needed some time off because we just couldn't believe how much he was backing the Titans. But joke's on us. Some well-deserved time off for Cody. So that means instead of bringing in the smart guys this week, I'm going to bring in the smart guy. We still have Mr. High-Low, Mark Garcia, joining us for our weekly program here. Mark, good to see you again. I'm sorry I missed it last week. It was the best I've ever sounded from what I've heard. How was your weekend?
Yeah, man, we missed you last week. It was good shooting the shit with, oh my God, now I forgot his name. I forgot.
Corey, I believe. Corey stepped into the shoes.
Yeah, shout out to Corey, man. My fault for forgetting your name. That was fun shooting it with Corey last week, but good to have you back, dude.
Good to be back. Good to be back. As I said before, I am a little sad that we're already almost through week 8 here. You only have a finite number of football games to lose money on, and believe me, I am. I am sad that there are so few, or almost just about half remaining. But look, let's get to it. We're talking football here. We always like to start off with talking about the last football game we saw, which listen, the Chargers and the Bears certainly wasn't the best football game I've ever seen. But I want to get your take because for the first time in a long time, the Chargers were involved in a game where they seemingly didn't have to sweat this one out. And I'm wondering if when you watched that game, you thought, okay, this is the Chargers that we wanted to see. This is Herbert, who has been getting a lot of heat. Like, let's face it, he's been getting a lot of heat lately because of his lack of fourth quarter heroics. I saw some absurd stat about how many times he's failed to come up big in the fourth quarter recently, even though he's the darling of a lot of us in the fantasy community about how good he is, and he has that big contract. So he looked good. He started off, I think, 14 for 14 or something absurd like that. So, Mark, when you see that game last night, is this you, or are you thinking, wow, okay, the Chargers figured it out, or are you just thinking, man, the Bears are bad?
Yeah, probably the latter. And it was kind of actually funny to, not funny, but disheartening. We'll put it that way, to see the way that they handled that game. They finally had a game environment where they were controlling. And what did they do? They took their foot off the gas and they did not take any opportunities in the second half to continue to grow and get better. They scored a grand total of 6 points in the second half against the Chicago Bears. And yes, they took a 24-7 lead into the half. But this is not a team that can kind of afford to take plays off. They are not there yet. They need to continue to figure things out. They have a grand total of about 7 quarters worth of NFL games played with both Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler on the field together. So they clearly have some things to figure out. They took the opportunity to not really do much of any of that. The one thing that they did do is they tried to get Quentin Johnston involved more in the game plan. Obviously, that was more out of necessity.
Welcome to the party, Quentin Johnston.
Well, he's not there yet. I mean,
he's at the door. Maybe he's at the door.
yeah, they were playing Simi Fehoko and like,
wow.
So yeah, I mean, like Quentin Johnston has a lot of work to do. They could have used those snaps in the second half. They gave him 3 targets in the second half. They could have used that to try and get him going a little bit more. It was honestly frustrating for me. And it was funny. The reason I said that it was funny to begin is that the Dallas Cowboys did the exact opposite this week. They kept their foot on the gas. And that, if you're not drawing the correlation there, obviously we have offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who's coming over from Dallas to the Chargers this year. So the fact that Mike McCarthy kept his foot on the gas in his game where they were controlling throughout, where his defense scored a defensive touchdown. They were up 33-3 at one point. And we saw Kellen Moore's offense kind of just like, oh, we did it, guys. We're here. Let's take the second half off. Let's score 6 points. That was telling to me that this team, this head coach, this coaching staff has not really come to terms with where their team is at and where they need to be by the end of the season here. Sorry, so Matt is having some mic issues, so we'll get right back to that. The other side of that game, the Chicago Bears, obviously Tyson Bagent, we expected him to come back down to earth at some point. That happened against a far more superior defense than they played in his first game in week 7 against the Las Vegas Raiders. What's up, dude? We're just talking about the Chicago Bears.
Mark, I'm telling you that they want to keep me away from this show so bad. My takes are so hot. My picks are too good. Vegas and FanDuel and DraftKings are all trying to make a call to prevent the people from getting the information they need.
Collusion,
here we are.
I tell you.
Collusion. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep fighting. Come hell or high water or internet connection, we're going to get it there.
Yes,
we're going to get it there. So I get the sense that you are not sold on this Chargers team figuring it out. We've talked earlier in the season about this kind of being a Kellen Moore problem. Obviously, we talk about everything usually being a Brandon Staley problem, Mr. Nice Guy. He shaved, which was good to see. Good to see. Turn a new leaf there. But I'm wondering if the health of Eckler, because let's face it, I mean, obviously he went down earlier in the season. Josh Kelly was not the guy. We've seen Eckler back, but last night it actually looked like the Eckler we're used to seeing. Do you think that is at least an indication that this offense and the team in general getting healthier, also getting healthier on defense, by the way, and we're going to get to the Bears in a second, but they are getting healthier on defense too. You saw Derwin James come up with a pick last night, I believe. So is that an indication? Yeah, the wonky. Yeah. Is that an indication that this team, a fully healthy Eckler, a spell back now with Josh Kelly not being the back, Parham getting his catches, Quentin Johnston getting involved, do you think they can make a run, or are you just, nah, we're going to see like the 9-7 or 8-9?
The problem is Brandon Staley. And what we saw last night, if you didn't believe that before, should have reinforced that point. The fact that this team, like we talked about, is not utilizing that second half of that game to get better. We know Joshua Palmer came into the game yesterday with a knee issue. It looked like they lost another wide receiver when he went off the field the way that he did. He was hopping around on the sideline to get to the blue medical tent, and then he comes back in the game, which was incredible to me. But the fact that they didn't use this game against a bottom feeder team to get better points to Brandon Staley. And I think that is the limiting factor here. And until that changes, I mean, and we've seen Brandon Staley's defense. Yeah, they have all the talent in the world. He's in year 3 of underperforming expectations on the defensive side of the ball, taking over a higher role in that defense now this year, and they're still kind of not performing well. Yes, we can point to the injuries. We can point to whatever we want. At some point, the finger has to be pointed at Brandon Staley here.
Yeah, and a relatively quiet game from Keenan Allen also last night, where we had been used to seeing him kind of carry them. I got to get this off my chest about the Bears. Okay, Tyson Bagent is a fine story. Okay, he went to What's the Matter You in the
what's
sticks.
the matter for you?
Yeah, I mean, I get it, and they had all these wacky pictures, and he went undrafted, but he made an NFL team. That is a great story. That is a great story. But here's where I kind of draw the line. Can this guy play? Because I don't know if it's a Bears thing or if it's a him thing, but he certainly doesn't look like a guy that should be getting as much pub as he is. That's where I'll leave it there, Mark. I don't know what you think of him, but I have not. I think I'm just so used to the Bears being sloppy in general that maybe I'm kind of like, oh, maybe if he had a different team or maybe if he had another chance. But I mean, let's face it. He went to a bottom school and didn't get drafted. It's not like this guy was like Tom Brady in round 7. Okay. So I don't know. Do you see anything? Do you see a spark from him at all?
Yeah, I actually do. And
come on.
Where I think he is, I won't say like an NFL caliber quarterback, but I don't want to compare him to Brock Purdy because I think that's unfair. But there are some things that I see in Tyson Bagent that Brock Purdy also exhibits, and those are pocket presence. He took 1 sack last night against a good pass rush, and his ability to go through his progressions. Now, that is something that still needs work, because when you're watching him play, we saw this last night. His first read target share, or his first read target, his percentage of throws that go to his first read is kind of off the charts. So he's staring down his wide receivers. So he needs to kind of make some strides in his progressions. So that means he needs to be able to diagnose a defense, get through his progressions, and find the best place to distribute the ball, as opposed to staring down his wide receivers. That said, his arm talent is there. We saw it on the first play from scrimmage yesterday. We saw him go deep, and this was exciting because Luke Getsy was like, "Hey, we're gonna silence all the critics. We're gonna air it out to Darnell Mooney down the sideline for 41 yards on the first play of the game." That was awesome, and it was like they completely went away from any semblance of aggression after that. But
Yeah, that was the only that was like their only
Yeah.
big shot, and it was almost like, hey, see, I can throw it downfield because they
yeah.
last week they had brought it, they brought in who was it, Peterman? They brought in somebody to heave a Hail Mary, and so there were questions about Bajan's arm, but then he was like, oh, see, I can throw it down on Mooney, and then, well, not for the rest of the game.
Yeah. So if Bajent can get some repetitions in practice, he will be able to work on that kind of progression reading defenses. But the pocket presence is a plus. His arm talent is good. That throw he made to DJ Moore down the sideline, just over the outstretched fingers of the defender, was an amazing throw. He stared DJ Moore down the entire time, so the defender knew it was coming. But that was an amazing throw, fit into a tight window where only his wide receiver could catch it. So his arm talent is okay. His arm strength isn't the best, but neither is guy like Brock Purdy. And if he can continue to make strides in the ability to work through his progressions, to diagnose a defense, to not stare down his pass catchers, there could be something there. And I think that there could be something there because he is smart. This is, again, I don't want to draw direct correlation and parallels to a guy like Brock Purdy, but these guys are in the league because of their smarts, because of their Wonderlic scores, because they're able to process information quickly. And that is, as has been proven in history, that is one of the most important aspects of playing quarterback, is the ability to process information quickly. So he's not there yet. He's not we shouldn't be calling for him to start over Justin Fields.
Sure.
There is an interesting case to be made for him to continue to start because of where the Bears are as an organization and the picks that they have. They continue to lose. They continue to see the Panthers lose. I mean, they could have the top 2 picks in this coming draft with some very, very nice prospects coming out. But he's not going to start over Justin Fields. He could be something, but it's going to take time. It's going to take reps. He needs to work on that processing that we talked about.
Yeah, in that situation too. I mean, I don't think they're going to go away from Justin Fields anytime soon. I mean, you see the potential of Fields, and then you see the worst of Fields, and then you start thinking maybe it's a Chicago problem. But just that situation is not, he's not quite there. But if the Vikings want to take a shot, maybe they could give him a call after that.
Too soon, man. Too soon.
I know. We'll get to that in a little bit. Mateo Feo in the chat he had like 60 to 70 family members go see him. I think it's a great story for Secret Bajent Man. I think it's great. I really do. But I kind of feel bad for all of my DJ Moore stock. I'll say that. Yeah. I mean, DJ Moore is a guy could be AJ Brown, but he performs like a wide receiver 3. That's just been the DJ Moore experience for a lot of Carolina, and now, unfortunately, for Chicago with the injuries. So, look, I always say you're smarter than me. The arm talent is there. I don't know how much more run Bajent's going to get, but if you believe in him, I will believe in him until next week when I don't again. Now, you did mention, and this is what we like to call in the business a good transition. You mentioned Brock Purdy quite a bit, and I do want to talk about the 49ers because the San Francisco 49ers were the juggernauts, right? They were the juggernauts. They were unstoppable. Oh, my God, who's going to beat these guys? Now they have 3 losses in a row, and look, you're not going to look at Brock Purdy's stat line and be like, oh, wow, 365 yards. This guy sucks. Nobody's going to say that. He did chuck it around. They kind of had to try and stay in the game with Cincinnati. But, I mean, he did throw. Now, you could say it was a great play by the defense, but that was a brutal pick. The one that happened right in front of him where the linebacker picked him off basically in his face. That was a brutal pick inside the red zone, which you haven't really seen Brock Purdy do at all, really. So you look at the last 3 losses, and listen, if they had 5 losses in a row, yeah, maybe you panic. But they had such a good start to the season. Are you worried about the 49ers here now that they have dropped 3 in a row?
No, I don't think so. What happened in those games is they played all those with either very, very limited contributions from Deebo Samuel or Deebo Samuel being out. And I've talked about this in the past, but Deebo Samuel is he is the utility knife in this offense. He is the pre-snap motion man. They do run some pre-snap motion with George Kittle, but Kittle is mostly used in line. So Debo losing the queen chess piece or the utility knife in this offense. We've seen kind of how that has gone over the past 3 games. Yes, Brock Purdy did not look good. And if Brock Purdy was concussed in week 7, I don't know how he was not concussed in week 8. He took a much harder hit. His head hit the ground, and then he threw 2 picks after that hit happened. And you saw his demeanor. He had this like blank stare over his face. I don't know how they did not, like the third party neurological consultant didn't step in with Brock Purdy specifically, because I was watching that game and he just had this like blank stare after he took that hit where he was like scrambling and then he just got overwhelmed. He got tackled backwards and his head hit the turf. And after that hit, he threw 2 picks and he had this like blank stare, non-expression kind of look on his face. Even after he threw his picks, he was just like, he had that like Eli Manning stare. It was just like the, like, I don't know how else to describe. He he didn't look there, dude. And
Didn't look like it was there. Yeah. Yeah.
The Eli Manning.
The Eli face. The Eli face. Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, we'll see what comes of that. If he self-reported symptoms after their week 7 game on the plane ride home, entered the concussion protocol. I don't know how he returned to practice so fast and flew through the concussion protocol unless he wasn't concussed, which is another story in and of itself. And then to see him not be pulled aside by the neurological consultant and from the eyes upstairs after that hit in that game in week 8, I was like, dude, I didn't see anything in week 7 to where he could have got a concussion. I know he took that hit in the sneak, but in week 8, there might have been something there.
And he does take hits though, because he's not. I mean, he's mobile when he wants to be. He does take hits. They put him in the sneak. They do sneak him. It's not like he's not Tom Brady with a clean jersey back there all the time. So again, and you look at the rest of that offense too. Kittle had a good game yesterday against the Bengals. CMC still had another touchdown. So offensively, I'm not going to write off Purdy either. I mean, like, I've never really written him off. Again, you look at 365 yards. It's not like this guy can't do it. But my main thing, and we don't talk a lot about individual defensive players, but, for fantasy purposes, I don't play in IDP leagues. If you do, more power to you. You are a crazy person to me, but I personally don't do it. But I'm looking at these 3 losses. Jamar Chase, 100 yards and a touchdown yesterday. Jordan Addison, 123 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Amari Cooper had 108 yards. I think their pass defense might be a little bit of a liability going forward. Am I crazy to think that the targeting opposing wide receiver ones against this defense, whether it be in DFS or a prop bet, like, am I crazy to keep doing that? Because look, between me, you, and the wall here, Jamar Chase made me a little bit of coin yesterday.
Yeah, I think it's a function of the defensive scheme that they're playing. They play a lot of off coverage. They play a lot of cover 3, cover 2. And they have to, what that does to a defense is the front 4 plus the linebackers, depending on if they're blitzing or not, are charged with generating their own pressure in the backfield. Because they're not blitzing at elite rates. They're kind of just, and it's the standard San Francisco mindset is they have to get pressure up front and they're going to play soft zone or in your face zone kind of behind that. So that has typically led to cover 3 and cover 2 being the primary defensive coverages that they're utilizing against cover 3. And again, San Francisco's top 10 in cover 3 usage rate. Typically what it does is it filters production to an opposing team's alpha because you're able to kind of just scheme them open looks in the soft holes in that coverage. So it doesn't surprise me that guys like Jordan Addison, who was the alpha in that game, like Jamar Chase, who is the alpha very clearly in Cincinnati, it doesn't surprise me that they are performing in the past 2 weeks like they were. Because the front had struggled to generate pressure on their own. And if you're not generating, you kind of need all those pieces working together to have success when you're playing off coverage, cover 2, cover 3, and you're not blitzing a lot. There's different ways of obviously bringing a defense together, but that requires a lot of coordination. And if one of those pieces are missing, it's going to make the entire defense kind of perform at a lower level. It's similar to what Robert Saleh does, obviously, with the connections there, similar to how Robert Saleh runs his defense in New York, where they task their front 4+ in generating organic pressure without having to blitz. That allows the linebacking core to drop into this. It's not exactly Tampa 2 where the linebackers are dropping in coverage, but it requires all those pieces kind of working together. And the linebackers are extremely important in a scheme like that because they have to diagnose the opposing offense very, very quickly in a snap. They have to diagnose if it's a run because they are the second layer of defense against the run, and they have to drop into coverage because the safeties are playing fairly deep in their defensive scheme. So that kind of gives you this sense of where the holes are against a defense where all those pieces are not working together. And we kind of saw that. The one play where it looked like this team was not there on defense was Jamar Chase's touchdown that came on the first play following a turnover in their own territory. I mean, Jamar Chase got free in the corner of the end zone, and they were in cover 2 in that play. And the safety was slow to get over. The cornerback did not track back with Jamar Chase, who was basically on a corner or a post route. So basically what that looks like is he came across the formation and on the opposite side of the field. So all those pieces like not working together, that is something that develops better and continues to improve with time. Their continuity on their defense has been a plus, which has allowed them to be playing with the same bodies and be in the same scheme, which is going to make those issues lessened. But this is still a team where I expect their defense to continue to improve as they get more reps under their belt throughout the rest of the season. But they're really, really going to need that pressure up front. And that's really what was lacking yesterday and over the previous 2 weeks. Checking real quick, they got 3 sacks on Burrow. I'm checking what they got on Kirk Cousins, RIP, 2 weeks ago. They did not sack Kirk Cousins 2 weeks ago. So this kind of tells you 3 sacks in 2 games. They kind of need that pressure up front. I'd have to go look at their pressure rate because that's very different than sacks. But I would guess, without looking at the information here, I'm going to check it while when you go talk, but I would guess that their pressure rate over the previous 2 games was not where it needed to be.
And, Jamar Chase, if they're not getting the pressure, I'm not saying Charvarius Ward was just shadowing Jamar Chase yesterday, but I mean, Chase does have a history with him when he was on the Chiefs where Chase put up 3 touchdowns on him. I mean, and again, you talk about those alphas, he's their lead DB. I don't know. And they have a bye week. They have a bye week coming up, and then they have the Jaguars, which is the perfect storm for what I just said, which is they can figure it out in the bye week, and then they face the Jaguars, where I just spent the top of the show kind of ripping Calvin Ridley. So maybe Christian Kirk that game, maybe. I don't know if I'll go back to the well on that game, but that should be a good one. So they can figure it out. I'm not panicking about the 49ers, but at one point I was like, okay, 49ers, Eagles, NFC Championship game, book it. I don't know. I don't know. And one of those reasons is it's a team we talked about. And I thought the Cowboys, just to talk about another team here, the Cowboys, and what? It's the transitive property here, right? The Cowboys got smoked by the 49ers a couple weeks ago. And I, for one, was like, man, this team really got to figure it out. But then yesterday, they throw the ball down the field finally at a high clip, and look what happens. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dak Prescott, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns. They probably could have done that against the Niners. And, if and when they meet again in the playoffs, that's going to have to be the game plan. I don't know if you're changing your tune. I know you wanted to get to some more pressure rates but on the Niners, but transition to the Cowboys. Are they back? Not that they went anywhere, but are they back? Are we buying into the Cowboys pass offense now, Mark?
I don't know if we can call them back because the Cowboys are really, really difficult to break down as a team because they've had 1 game out of 7 games where it was like a neutral game environment. And that was their game against the Chargers, which was a 20-17 game. You look at every other one of their games, and they started the season with 4 games against bottom feeder teams. They played the Giants, the Jets, the Cardinals, and the Patriots. All those teams are in the bottom 10 in the league in
And lost to the
scoring.
Cardinals.
And
Lost.
They lost to the Cardinals. And then they went on, they got smoked by the 49ers. They played the Chargers to a close 20-17 game. And then they come out and smoke the Rams. So this team is very, very difficult to break down because we hadn't seen really what this offense is likely to be at the end of the season yet. And I don't think they're even I don't think we have seen what their offense is going to be in week 17 going into the playoffs, week 18 still yet, because this team has played 6 out of their 7 games in extreme environments. They've played one game where it was close. Also in that, coming into this week, CeeDee Lamb had a 22.2% targets per route run rate. He was around 22% in team target market share. They had not been leaning on him as they had in the past. Tony Pollard, you look at his underlying metrics coming into this week, and they were basically, all of his efficiency metrics were basically cut in half compared to last season. He had an 8.8% breakaway run rate last year. That was down to 4.2% this year. And I was trying to figure out why that is. And it's very clearly that they're not manufacturing him touches in space. Last season, Zeke was that between the tackles guy. They were able to utilize Pollard off tackle. They were able to utilize him on bump and run through the air, getting him the ball in space. This year, it's here you go, man. I know your body's not built for it, but here, go run between the tackles for 12 to 15 times and we'll see what we get. It's okay, well, we know that he's, last night or yesterday, he had 4.4 yards per carry, and that was one of his highest games in the season. Kind of goes to show why things are not kind of clicking for this offense. One, they haven't had to have those in-game reps yet. And two, we didn't really know what this offense wanted to be. We knew Mike McCarthy was yeah, we're going to run the football because we want to rest our defense. Yeah, okay, good luck with that guy. But we didn't really know what else was going to happen here. And
that's a McCarthy problem, though. Not to cut you off, but that's a McCarthy problem because you go back to Pollard being built the way he is, and I know Cody and you have talked about this. He was a better 2 because of his dimensions, and he excelled in that role. But as a 1, and look, for fantasy purposes, as a guy who I saw go as high as the 2nd round in some drafts, he's had 3 games, 3 of his last 4 under 10 fantasy points. He probably hasn't won you single-handedly any weeks like maybe he could have last year or the year before when he was behind Zeke. Because of that and because of McCarthy, would you, if you were coaching the Cowboys, would you switch to the pass first now and not this run the ball stuff with the guy who can't do it for 3 downs?
100%. And the reason is when you're trying to run the football to rest your defense or whatever, you have high rates of early down rushes. And what that does is it's very predictable from a defense. You cheat your safety into the box. You have 8 men in the box. You look at Tony Pollard's average defenders in the box, and it's amongst the highest in the league because he's seeing first down carries, second down carries, where it's an obvious rushing situation. Now, last week, at least, or this week, whatever, in week 8, we actually saw this team pass more on first down. We saw this team gain 8 yards or pick up a first down on first down passes. And that allows your offense to be more fluid because you're not basically playing into exactly what the opposition is going to expect. So that was good. And it was good also to see this offense kind of keep their foot on the gas and continue to run their offense coming out of their bye. Because like I said, we hadn't really seen what this offense is going to be moving forward. CeeDee Lamb was not the alpha. He was just a wide receiver on the team. Tony Pollard had not gotten going. We saw Jake Ferguson, tight end Jake Ferguson, has a 4.4 ADOT coming into this week. He had a 29.7% red zone target share. So his role was just this very, very short area role, but he was being utilized heavy in the red zone. We actually saw them target Jake Ferguson between the 20s, and we saw it greater than 4.4 yards downfield. He scored that 18-yard touchdown. That was good to see, or 11-yard, I can't remember. 18 or
good looking
yards.
Touchdown too. Good looking grab. Great looking grab.
So they have the pieces. They have not figured out, I think, what how they're going to maximize those pieces. They need to get Brandon Cooks running more downfield. They need to expand his route tree to keep defenses honest, to influence the safeties. They need to utilize Michael Gallup because Michael Gallup is out there running wind sprints. You might as well run him. You might as well run him deep on crossers, on posts, on nines, on goes, on corners, to at least influence opposing safeties, to create that space underneath for Jake Ferguson, for Tony Pollard, for CeeDee Lamb. They need to get all these pieces kind of working together. The one good, this was a long roundabout way of answering your question, but you asked me, like, are they here? Are they back? I think they're starting to, and I think this was a good step in the right direction based on how they handled their offense coming out of the bye.
I think I do think if you are a CeeDee Lamb holder, you're thrilled. Because like, you know what he can do. You've seen it. We get it. If you're a Tony Pollard holder, I don't, trade deadlines are coming up. I'm making contingency plans, or at least I'm not thinking like he's going to come around. He's going to come around. You're going to have to, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet. I don't all of a sudden think they're going to be, he's not going to morph into Derrick Henry overnight or it's just not going to happen. So I think if on one part of the offense, and even if you're a Dak holder, especially, we're talking about 2 QB leagues, it's not like Dak can't do it. He definitely can. So hopefully, you see what you can do. And again, one game doesn't make a season, but you see what you could do in that one game, and you see what you didn't do against the 49ers and like how bad you looked there. And you're like, I wonder which team we should try to emulate more. The one that probably passed all over the Rams and with Dak with 4 touchdowns. So I'm optimistic if I have Cowboys pass catchers. I am panicking, I guess, on all of my Tony Pollard shares. Not going to say he's not going to score a touchdown. You just don't know when. You can't predict when that will come now. Listen, Cody asked us, and I will honor the Titans. Look, he nailed it. He did. He nailed it. He was high on Will Levis. He wanted to see what you can get in a full game, wanted to air it out. Look, the Titans are usually a team, if I'm watching NFL Red Zone on a Sunday, they're usually the team that I forget are playing. And Scott Hansen will cut to the game and it'll be like, and the Titans are in the red zone. I was like, oh wow, yeah, I can't believe it. They have been yawn inducing to me. Obviously, Derrick Henry can break off a run or a stiff arm, and that's it's crazy. But with Tannehill back there, it hasn't been some sort of excitement every week that must-see TV. With Will Levis, though, at least for DeAndre Hopkins and at least for 4 catches, man, they looked like a good connection. They looked like they had been playing together. It was vintage Hopkins. And I don't know. There's no way they rush Tannehill back now, right? They can't give this guy another shot, can they?
They should be exploring trade options. It might be difficult due to Tannehill's contract situation, but they should be poking around the league here. I'm not ready to announce anoint Will Levis as the next coming, but there was I forget who said it, and I can't give the proper shout out here, but somebody said on Twitter that I think it was Nelson Souza. Anyway, I digress. Somebody said on Twitter this past week.
Shout out Nelson if it was, and if it wasn't, no shout out.
I can't remember. It was either Nelson Souza or Scott Barrett. One of those two. Go follow those guys if you don't. It was something I think it was Scott actually. Anyway, something to the effect of the NFL teams very clearly viewed Will Levis or held him in a higher regard than the fantasy community did coming into the draft. There were multiple reports of teams saying, hey, we would have took him here. If this would have happened in the draft, we would have taken him here. The Panthers were on record saying they were asked a question, do you view the top 3 quarterbacks in the same tier? And they said no, top 4. So teams very clearly held Will Levis in a high regard coming into the draft. He slid because that's just how the cookies crumbled in the draft, and the pieces kind of fell as they did. The Titans took that gamble. They know Ryan Tannehill's contract situation. He's not going to be around for that much longer. So they took that gamble. That said, Will Levis has some things he needs to work on. That first touchdown pass to DeAndre Hopkins, the one with the
Pass interference.
pass interference, the defender completely stopped on the play because he's like, I got held, I got interfered with. He was sitting there at the goal line going like this, looking around as DeAndre Hopkins is still tracking the football in the air. So there was a solid 2-3 seconds where the defender would just stopped playing.
Hopkins grabbed him and threw him.
Threw him one for the defensive players, for the youth out there that are playing defense or playing cornerback, playing safety, never freaking quit on the play because you don't know if their flag is coming. But two, Will Levis has some work to do. The intangibles are clearly there. He has okay arm strength. He's able to distribute the football. He can run a distributor role, kind of what is going to be asked of a Tennessee quarterback. So he can play, but there's still some things that need to get worked out. And obviously as a rookie in his first start, we expect that. So I'm not sitting here saying oh yeah, hell yeah, Will Levis threw 4 touchdowns. He's here. Ryan Tannehill, you're trash. See ya. There might be a little bit of truth to that, but he's not there yet. Can he develop into a pocket passer, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins type NFL quarterback? Yeah, he can be that. He's not there yet, but he can be that. That is kind of the end goal for the Titans here. If I'm them, Titans, sitting at 3-4, looking at my end of season schedule, judging where I'm at, they have to be fielding offers for Derrick Henry. They have to be fielding offers for DeAndre Hopkins. They have to be fielding offers for Ryan Tannehill. If the offer's not there, fine, but they cannot shut the door. And I think some of what we saw coming into this week out of Tennessee, we'll say Camp Tennessee, just the front office all the way down to the coaching staff, they were saying oh yeah, we're not talking to anybody. I think that was a little bit gaming of the game. I don't necessarily think I take that at face value. I think they're you up your offer, man, because we're going to play hardball a little bit. Derrick Henry, on the last year of his contract, in his age 29 season, he has to be on the trade block. You have to at least explore what's going on. And I know Tennessee, Derrick Henry is the face of that franchise since he was drafted there. Players have come and went, but he is kind of still that rock. I get it. There's an emotional connection and stuff, but you have to be at least open to discussing any 29-year-old running back in the last year of his contract here.
Trading him would kill the fans. I mean, that would kill the fans. And I get it from an owner perspective. Maybe that's not what you want to do. Just speaking of King Henry, he had a 100-yard game this past weekend. Again, kind of showing the offense was clicking, I guess the way it should be. To put a bow on this though, and I guess, again, one game, right? One game. But do you think what you saw is an upgrade of what Tannehill can and can't do? Do you, or are we just a product of Tannehill's age, Tannehill's injuries? I mean, but are we talking upgrade, or are we just kind of staying the same if we go with Will Levis from here on out?
I think it's close. I don't think it's necessarily I can't just anoint it like an upgrade, hell yeah, let's go, the rest of the season is ours type thing. The drop off isn't as steep as people probably thought coming into the season. So, I mean, that's a situation if hey, got a quarterback on a rookie deal. Yeah, there's going to be some dead money associated with Tannehill, and that contract is not the best. But you have to at least explore it because the drop off necessarily wasn't there. They don't need a guy who is coming out to throw 40 plus times a game. They need a game manager, a guy who is going to be able to distribute the football, get the ball into his playmakers' hands, and they're just going to leverage their offensive line and their defensive line. And that's really what I think is coming into their own this season, is an offensive line that performed into bottom 5 levels over the first 5-6 weeks of the NFL season. Their talent is very clearly not on the levels that they've had up front through the rest of Derrick Henry's career. They lost a lot of pieces to injury, to retirement, to trade, to free agency. This is a new unit, but they're starting to come together to gel. They're starting to figure out how we can maximize our run blocking scheme with the talent that we had. I mean, it was very straightforward to start the season. It was like, block the man in front of you. We're not going to run any weird stunts or any unique blocking concepts. Over the last 2 weeks, they kind of have started to introduce those. And I think the reason for that is because of the turnover that they had along the offensive line, that they couldn't really just come out to start the season because of the abridged preseason, because of the abridged offseason, and run those like unique run blocking concepts. Now they're kind of coming into their own. So that is a positive for this team moving forward.
And Minnesota's got a call. I think like
so, yeah.
they at least have to pick up the phone, at least send a text. I don't know, DM, anything. Minnesota, you have to. I mean, I feel terrible for Kirk Cousins. I really do. I mean, I think if you don't watch football, you think Kirk Cousins might not be that great. I mean, I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. They have the weapons in Minnesota. The offense looked good. Jefferson I would say, was probably going to come back. Now I don't know. You know, if they can't get somebody in there who can get the ball to these playmakers. So I think if you're Minnesota and you see the Lions at 5-2 and Minnesota's sitting at 4-4 now,
Mm-hmm.
You're not far off. That division, NFC North, isn't great. The Packers are not going to threaten you. The Bears are not going to threaten you. So you got to call. You got to call. And if you're not calling, Tennessee, call Tom Brady. Call somebody. You know, call somebody. See if anybody can give it a go, because they really had it working. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Lions, we'll talk about Monday Night Football. Lions, Raiders, another epic primetime game that we're treated to. But who knows? You know, the Raiders could surprise. They could surprise.
Yeah.
The Lions might lay an egg. Who knows? You know, we don't know. That's why we watch. That's why we love it. But I like to get your take on the DFS picks for tonight, especially the contrarian. We have the contrarian edge optimizer over at sportstopia.io. Gives you that edge if you need it. Like, who are the guys that we're not picking? Who are the guys that we're not thinking of? Who are the guys that can make a difference? So you look at this slate tonight. I mean, Amon-Ra is going to be probably a lot of people's captain. Jared Goff's going to be in there. But is there anybody tonight that you like that could surprise?
Yeah, this is a very straightforward showdown slate. And the
Talking
reason
chalk?
Yeah, well, it's just straightforward because you look at both of these teams, and these are two of the most concentrated offenses in the league, based on where they are right now. 50.6% of the available targets for the Raiders have gone through two guys, Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. 84% of the backfield opportunities for the Raiders have gone through one man, Josh Jacobs. So it's very easy to follow the volume with this team. Now look at the Lions, and they're about, if not more concentrated than the Raiders are this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta have accounted for 52.3% of the team's total targets this season. Now with David Montgomery out of the picture, as was the case last week in week 7, rookie running back Jahmyr Gibbs handled an 87% snap rate. He saw 21 running back opportunities, 10 of which were targets in a negative game environment against the Ravens. So you look at these two offenses, and it's like there's 3 primary contributors on the Raiders. There's 3 primary contributors on the Lions. Behind those 6 players, and there's a lot of interesting aspects that go into that as well. You look at the Raiders; they are 3rd worst in the league in red zone touchdown rate allowed on defense. That means
Love that. Love it.
Yeah, so that means 73.91% of opposing red zone trips result in a touchdown against the Raiders. So that we can draw a couple of conclusions to that. One, it knocks the Detroit kicker because we expect them to score at a higher rate when they enter the red zone. And obviously on the other side of that, the kicker situation in Las Vegas, they have a very, very low red zone touchdown rate, only 41.67% on offense. That ranks 27th in the league. The problem is Daniel Carlson has not been good, and he's injured, so we don't know who's going to be in the kicker for the Raiders and if they're going to be good. But all of that discussion kind of leads to there are 3 primary pieces on each offense, and behind that, there are a bunch of guys who are playing around the same amount of snaps. You have Trey Tucker in Las Vegas, who actually outsnapped Hunter Renfrow each of the last 2 weeks. You have Austin Hooper, who's playing around 40% of the offensive snaps now with the rookie tight end. His name escapes me right now.
Michael Mayer?
Yes, Michael Mayer. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
I was going to ask you about him, but go ahead with Hooper.
Yeah. You have guys like Antoine Green now in Detroit, who stepped into some of the vacated snaps that were left behind by Marvin Jones. Hope everything's going on with him. He stepped away to address a personal matter. So hopefully everything's good with that. But Antoine Green, Jamison Williams, Brock Wright, Khalif Raymond, all 4 of those guys are playing about 40% of the offensive snaps for Detroit. So it's like we have 3 very clear places on each team where the volume's expected to go. And behind that, a ton of ambiguity. So I think you can make very clear builds by anchoring around Jared Goff plus 1 or 2 of his pass catchers, and then either Josh Jacobs, Jacoby Myers, and Devontae Adams on the other side. And I leave out Jimmy Garoppolo from that discussion because of the poor red zone touchdown rate for the Raiders, the fact that he's only surpassed 16.1 fantasy points twice this season. He's only thrown for multiple touchdowns twice this season. So if choosing quarterback, it very clearly goes to Jared Goff. But behind that core, it becomes very, very ambiguous. And I think that you can, if you're playing this showdown slate, I think you make a very tight core, and then you rotate 1 or 2 of the guys that we talked about, including the kickers, Trey Tucker, Hooper, Raymond, Green, Williams, and Wright. And you just try and capture a touchdown out of one of those guys.
You hope you roll the dice, you hit it. I will say, if you're planning on fading Devontae Adams, which, I mean, look, it's not like he's been lighting the world on fire. He's been frustrated about his role. At least when they played on Monday night earlier this year, he went 13 receptions, 20 targets, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jimmy G was slinging the rock. Jimmy G will hopefully be back tonight. So maybe if you're a Devontae Adams holder, if you're going to make a lineup, maybe that's good things for Devontae. I mean, you're not going to bet against the guy, right? It's really like, hey, Josh McDaniels, can you, I don't know, use your best player? Do you think that might help the team? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't coach. Well, Mark, appreciate it. I think it was good. I love the insight about the kicker situation, because you see it in some of these Millie Maker lineups. What's in there sometimes, a defense or a kicker, guys, I don't usually tend to think about when I do the lineup. So that was good insight there. Hopefully we're treated to a good Monday night game. The primetime games have been a little iffy, but who knows? Maybe we might get lucky. All right, Mark, like I said, we're almost halfway through the season. Hopefully we have a better second half. And for all of you guys tuning in, thank you so much. Check out sportstopia.io, my studs and duds, Mark's analysis, and all the other good stuff. Until then, have a great week of football.
See ya.